Together we're going to make a film.
Here we are. The windows are boarded up. It's very awkward. And we are willing to take the risk of doing this because it seemed like we could speak to a lot of people, and we do want to do that.
How many people are in your organization?
Well, we're a very small organization relative to the task to be done. And we can't discuss exactly the size. We're small, but we don't feel weak. We want to make a revolution. We think there has to be a revolution.
From the underground, that radical left-wing group, the Weathermen, has claimed responsibility for yesterday's dynamiting of a statue of a Chicago policeman. The group promises more attacks on the establishment around the entire country starting next week. The medium for this message was a tape recording, reputedly by the fugitive Weatherman leader, Bernardine Dorn. It came by mail this morning to New York.
The group said that it planted the bomb to commemorate the one-year anniversary of the military overthrow of the Allende government in Chile.
There are 20 to 30 people in the group. We know who they are. There are federal warrants out on, I believe, 12 of them.
A dynamite explosion last night heavily damaged one floor of the Gulf Oil Corporation's Pittsburgh headquarters. No one was hurt. A radical group called the Weather Underground said it set the blast in retaliation for Gulf's policies in Portuguese Angola in Africa.
We felt that more and more people would be attracted to the revolutionary violence of the Weather Underground and of the other groups. What I began to discover was that Americans are taught again and again from a very early age that the only violence, that all violence which is not sanctioned by the government is either criminal or mentally ill. And so our violence was categorized as that, criminal and mentally ill. Violence didn't work.
And now it's winter. You feel like winter in America. Yeah, it's a time when all of the healers, brothers who could help us, done been killed. They put them in jails. Yeah, people know it's something wrong. Everybody ought to know winter.
Good evening. A quarter century of American involvement in South Vietnam is over.
These are tonight's headlines. South Vietnam surrenders and the communists occupy Saigon. We have dramatic film of the evacuation of Americans and Vietnamese from Saigon.
The war in Vietnam was the most visible and the most palpable and the most dramatic expression of what we were opposed to. And so our unity was based on throwing our bodies into combat against the war in Vietnam. When the war in Vietnam ended, all of that unity began to unravel.
A lot of us, with the end of the war in '75, began to come up with the idea that we should come up, that it was pointless to stay underground.
It wasn't going to be as dramatic after the Vietnam War ended in '75, and there were increasing struggles about what was wrong with our direction, and I think that happened. The whole left was challenged at the end of the Vietnam War.
The end happened because most all leftist political organizations, when they reach the point of irrelevancy, turn in on themselves, and kill each other. And that's approximately what happened.
The organization was coming apart through a variety of means. People deciding to turn themselves in, a great deal of criticism of us, of me, for the failures and weaknesses in our leadership.
People knew each other's whereabouts on a need-to-know basis. And toward the end, that became more and more restricted because everybody got more and more freaked out, paranoid, I would say, to some extent. And so I had no way. I wasn't living in a collective. I was living on my own. And what I had as a connection was meeting to meeting. We're going to meet at such and such a place at such and such a time. I raised the criticisms in a particularly sharp way at a meeting with some people in leadership, and they didn't show up for the next meeting, and then I didn't have any way to get in touch with them anymore. So it was over for me.
October 19th, 1977. Dear Dad, hello from the other side of the shadows. I don't mean to shock you, but I've been contemplating writing to you for a long time. First, the good news, which is you have a second grandson. He had a good birth, no drugs, no problems, and his mom is okay too. I've been working when I can, which is not full-time and not nearly enough to support us. Not only do I lack skills and qualifications, I also lack the references and work record fitting my age, all of which become more important with this extreme unemployment. Right now, it's hard to get a job pushing a broom if you can't prove you've been doing it for 10 years. Often I wake up and find it completely inexplicable how and why I am where I am today and disconnected from my family. As I know you won't be out here for a while, I'm finding an address where you can write me directly. Please send me your advice or reflections on what I should do.
Mark Rudd, the fugitive radical, turned himself in today to authorities in New York City after years of hiding. He was a leader of the Weather Underground back in the 60s, but he's 30 years old now, and the world has changed.
Today, Rudd came out of hiding and walked into the office of the District Attorney of New York County to give himself up.
Rudd didn't say why he gave himself up, but his father said this. He's 30 years old. You get to be too old to be a revolutionary. You have to start something else.
Even though the organization had ended and we really didn't have a strategic and political reason for staying underground, I found the idea of turning myself in revolting. And I had a baby. We had a new baby, and we immersed ourselves in a whole new life with parents and children. And moved to the East Coast and sort of started over. And Zaid was getting old enough so that it was obviously becoming complicated to never have anybody know where we lived and never have anybody come over to our house. So I came to that decision in the summer of '80, finally. And once I made the decision, it was just a matter of holding my nose and going through with the surrender.
Bernardine Dohrn, the former anti-war leader and student radical, surrendered today in Chicago.
Rebellion is inevitable and continuous. Resistance by every means necessary is happening and will continue to happen within the United States as well as around the world. And I remain committed to the struggle ahead.
By the end of the 70s, almost all of the members of the Weather Underground had turned themselves in. Few ended up going to prison.